Hello. Get ready for a powerful and emotional story about a pregnant schoolgirl who was afraid she would be evicted by her stepfather after giving birth. Join us for an inspiring journey of resilience and hope. But don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Sophie was a bright and ambitious young girl from a small town in the Midwest. She had dreams of going to college and becoming a doctor, but those dreams were shattered when she found out she was pregnant at the age of 16. Sophie's parents were strict and religious, and they were devastated by the news. Her mother, Mary, was ashamed of her daughter's pregnancy and worried about what the neighbors would think. Her stepfather, John, was even more furious. He had always been tough on Sophie, but now he was downright abusive. As Sophie's pregnancy progressed, John became increasingly hostile. He would yell at her, call her names, and even hit her when he thought she had done something wrong. Sophie was terrified of him and didn't know what to do. Mary tried to intervene, but she was afraid of John too. She would beg him to be kind to Sophie, but he would just sneer at her and tell her to mind her own business. Mary was caught between her love for her daughter and her fear of her husband. Sophie felt like she had nowhere to turn. She couldn't talk to her friends at school because she was afraid they would judge her. She couldn't confide in her mother because she was too scared of John. And she couldn't go to the police because she didn't want to cause trouble for her family. Sophie's pregnancy was difficult. She was sick all the time, and she struggled to keep up with her schoolwork. But she was determined to finish high school and give her baby a better life. She found solace in reading books about other women who had overcome adversity and succeeded against the odds. As her due date approached, Sophie became more and more afraid. She didn't know what John would do when the baby was born. She had heard stories of other girls in her situation being kicked out of their homes or sent away to live with relatives. She didn't know if she could handle being separated from her baby. Sophie went into labor one night, and Mary rushed her to the hospital. John stayed behind, telling them he had work to do. Sophie was relieved to be away from him, but she was still terrified about what would happen when she came home. After a long and painful labor, Sophie gave birth to a healthy baby girl. She was overjoyed to hold her daughter in her arms, but she couldn't shake the feeling of dread that settled in her stomach. When Sophie and Mary returned home from the hospital, John was waiting for them. Sophie tried to avoid him, but he cornered her in the kitchen. "You've made a mess of your life, Sophie," he said, his voice cold and menacing. "But you're not going to bring us all down with you. You're leaving this house tonight, and you're taking that baby with you." Sophie was stunned. She couldn't believe he was actually going to kick her out. She looked to her mother for help, but Mary just stood there, her eyes downcast. "I can't leave," Sophie said, tears streaming down her face. "I have nowhere to go. Please, Daddy, don't do this." John's face twisted into a sneer. "I'm not your daddy, and you're not my problem anymore. Pack your things and get out of my house." Sophie ran to her room and frantically stuffed her belongings into a duffel bag. She had no idea where she was going to go, but she knew she couldn't stay there. She picked up her baby and cradled her close, praying that everything would be okay. As Sophie was leaving the house, her mother finally spoke up. "John, please don't do this. She's just a child. Let her stay here with us." John turned on her with fury in his eyes. "You're not her mother, Mary. And you don't get to make decisions for this family. If you want to follow her out the door, that's fine with me." Mary hesitated for a moment, looking torn between her loyalty to her husband and her love for her daughter. In the end, she chose Sophie. She grabbed a small bag and followed her daughter out the door. Sophie was shaking with fear and exhaustion as she stumbled down the street, her baby in her arms and her bag slung over her shoulder. She had nowhere to go and no one to turn to. As they walked, a car pulled up beside them. It was a woman that Sophie recognized from church. Her name was Sarah, and she had always been kind to Sophie, even when others shunned her for being pregnant. "Hey, Sophie," Sarah said, rolling down the window. "Are you okay? Do you need a ride somewhere?" Sophie was hesitant at first, but she was so desperate that she eventually climbed into the car with Sarah and her teenage daughter. They drove for a few minutes in silence before Sarah spoke up. "I don't know what's going on, Sophie, but I can tell you're in trouble. You don't have to be alone. We have a spare bedroom at our house, and you and your baby are welcome to stay with us for as long as you need to." Sophie was overwhelmed by Sarah's kindness. She couldn't believe that someone would help her, a pregnant teenage outcast. She burst into tears and thanked Sarah from the bottom of her heart. They arrived at Sarah's house, and Sophie was shocked by how warm and welcoming it was. Sarah's husband, Tom, greeted her with a smile and helped her with her bags. He showed her to a small bedroom and told her to make herself at home. Sophie settled into her new life with the Johnson family. They treated her like one of their own and helped her care for her baby. They encouraged her to finish high school and even offered to babysit so she could attend classes. Sophie couldn't believe her luck. She had gone from being homeless and alone to having a loving and supportive family. She thanked God every day for bringing the Johnsons into her life. Sophie threw herself into her studies, determined to finish high school and make a better life for herself and her daughter. She took night classes and worked during the day, but she still found time to spend with her baby and the Johnsons. One day, while she was at work, she received a letter in the mail. It was from her stepfather, John. He had tracked her down and was demanding that she come back home. He threatened to call the police if she didn't comply. Sophie was terrified. She didn't know what to do. She couldn't go back to that house, but she didn't want to get in trouble with the law either. She confided in Sarah, who immediately sprang into action. "We're not going to let him take you back there, Sophie," she said, her jaw set. "We'll find a way to protect you and your baby." Dear viewer, just a moment. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel to stay tuned for more powerful and inspiring stories like this one. This is very important to me. By subscribing to the channel, you will never miss the opportunity to be touched and inspired by real stories of resilience and hope. So hit the subscribe button right now, and let's continue this incredible journey together. Sarah and Tom contacted a lawyer and explained the situation to him. He agreed to take on Sophie's case pro bono and helped her get a restraining order against John. Sophie was relieved to have legal protection, but she still couldn't shake the feeling of fear that haunted her. She didn't want to spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, waiting for John to come after her. One night, while she was lying in bed, she had an idea. She remembered something that her mother had told her years ago. Mary had always loved to write, and she had once written a book that had been published. Sophie wondered if she could do the same thing. She had always loved to read and write, and she thought that maybe she could turn her own story into a book. She pulled out a notebook and started scribbling down ideas. Over the next few months, Sophie poured her heart and soul into her writing. She wrote about her pregnancy, her fears, her struggles, and her triumphs. She wrote about the Johnsons, who had become her second family, and about the love she had found in her daughter. Sophie's book was published a year later. It was a bestseller, and it touched the hearts of millions of readers around the world. Sophie became a public figure, and she used her platform to advocate for young mothers and survivors of abuse. John read the book too, and he was enraged. He tried to sue Sophie for defamation, but the case was thrown out of court. Sophie refused to be silenced, and she continued to speak out against him and others like him. Sophie's life had come full circle. She had gone from being a pregnant schoolgirl with nowhere to turn to a successful author and activist. She had found love, family, and purpose in the midst of her pain. Sophie's book tour took her to cities all over the country. She met fans who had been moved by her story, and she spoke at events and conferences about the importance of breaking the cycle of abuse. One day, as she was signing books at a bookstore in Los Angeles, she noticed a man standing in the back of the room. He was tall, with dark hair and piercing blue eyes. She couldn't take her eyes off him. After the event was over, the man approached her. "Hi, my name is Alex," he said, holding out his hand. I just wanted to say how much your book meant to me. It touched me deeply." Sophie felt a spark of attraction, but she was hesitant. She had been hurt before, and she didn't want to get involved with someone who might not understand her past. But Alex was persistent, and he kept showing up at her events and sending her messages. Eventually, Sophie agreed to go out with him. They went on a date to a fancy restaurant, and Sophie was nervous but excited. They talked for hours, and she felt like she could be herself around him. Over the next few weeks, Sophie and Alex fell deeply in love. He was kind, patient, and understanding, and he never judged her for her past. They talked about everything, and Sophie knew that she had found someone special. One day, Alex surprised Sophie with a trip to Hawaii. They stayed in a luxurious resort, and Alex took her on long walks on the beach and romantic dinners under the stars. Sophie was in heaven. On the last night of their trip, Alex took Sophie to a secluded spot on the beach. He got down on one knee and pulled out a small box. "Sophie, I love you more than anything in this world," he said. "Will you marry me?" Sophie was speechless. Tears filled her eyes as she nodded her head and said yes. They kissed under the moonlight, and Sophie felt like everything in her life had led her to this moment. Sophie and Alex got married 6 months later. It was a beautiful ceremony, with all of their friends and family in attendance. Sarah and Tom walked Sophie down the aisle, and little Olivia was the flower girl. Sophie looked around at the people she loved and felt overwhelming gratitude. She had gone from being a scared teenager to a successful author to a wife and mother. She had found the love and acceptance she had always longed for, and she knew that she had a bright future ahead of her. Sophie and Alex settled into married life and started talking about starting a family. Sophie was excited but nervous. She had always wanted to be a mother, but she was afraid that she might repeat the mistakes of her own mother. She had always been open with Alex about her past, and he had been supportive and understanding. He reassured her that they would make great parents and that they would do everything in their power to break the cycle of abuse. After a few months of trying, Sophie found out that she was pregnant. She was over the moon with joy. She and Alex started making plans for the baby's arrival. They picked out names and decorated the nursery. Sophie couldn't wait to hold her child in her arms. As her due date approached, Sophie started to feel anxious. She had nightmares about her stepfather and worried that she wouldn't be a good mother. Alex was there for her every step of the way, holding her hand and telling her that she was strong and capable. Finally, the day arrived. Sophie went into labor, and Alex rushed her to the hospital. She gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, who they named Lily. Sophie was overwhelmed with love for her daughter, and she knew that she would do anything to protect her. But as she held Lily in her arms, Sophie's fears came flooding back. She was afraid that her stepfather would come back into her life and hurt her or her daughter. She couldn't bear the thought of history repeating itself. She confided in Alex, and he promised her that he would always be there for her and Lily. He told her that they would never let anyone hurt them. Sophie felt a sense of relief, knowing that she had a partner who would stand by her no matter what. Sophie, Alex, and Lily went home from the hospital and settled into their new life as a family. They had ups and downs, but they always worked through their problems together. Sophie felt like she had finally found the happiness and security that had eluded her for so long. Lily grew up quickly, and before Sophie knew it, she was starting her freshman year of high school. Sophie was proud of her daughter, but she couldn't help but worry. She remembered how difficult high school had been for her, and she didn't want Lily to go through the same struggles. One day, Sophie received a call from Lily's school. The principal told her that Lily had been caught smoking on campus and that she was going to be suspended for a week. Sophie was shocked and upset. She couldn't believe that her daughter would do something like that. When Lily got home from school that day, Sophie was waiting for her. She sat Lily down and asked her why she had started smoking. Lily was hesitant at first, but then she opened up to her mother. She told Sophie that she had started smoking to fit in with her new group of friends. They had pressured her into trying it, and she didn't want to seem like a loser. Sophie listened patiently and then told Lily that smoking was dangerous and that it wasn't worth risking her health for the sake of fitting in. Sophie and Lily talked for hours that night. They talked about the pressures of high school and how difficult it can be to navigate social situations. They talked about the importance of being true to oneself and not giving in to peer pressure. As the week went on, Sophie and Lily spent more time together. They went shopping, watched movies, and baked cookies. Sophie realized that this was an opportunity to strengthen her bond with her daughter. On the last day of Lily's suspension, Sophie got a call from her stepfather. He told her that he had heard about Lily's suspension and that he was disappointed in her. Sophie felt a wave of anger wash over her. She couldn't believe that her stepfather had the audacity to call her after all these years. But then her stepfather said something that made Sophie's blood run cold. He said, "You know, if you ever need a place to stay, you and Lily are always welcome in my home." Sophie was stunned. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her stepfather was offering her a place to stay. After everything he had done to her, she didn't know what to say. Finally, she found her voice. She told her stepfather that she would never set foot in his home again, and that he had no right to offer her anything. She hung up the phone and felt a sense of relief wash over her. She realized that she had finally broken free from her past. Sophie looked at her daughter and realized that she had done something right. She had raised a strong, independent, and resilient young woman, and she knew that no matter what life threw their way, they would face it together as a family. Lily finished her freshman year of high school and Sophie was relieved that it was over. But as the summer went on, Sophie started to notice changes in her daughter. Lily was tired all the time, and she seemed to have lost interest in the things she used to enjoy. Sophie asked her daughter what was wrong, but Lily brushed her off, saying she was just tired from a long school year. Sophie started to worry that Lily might be sick, so she took her to the doctor. The doctor ran some tests, and Sophie was shocked to hear the diagnosis. Lily was pregnant. Sophie was devastated. She didn't know how this could have happened. She had talked to Lily about the importance of safe sex, and Lily had assured her that she was being careful. Sophie sat down with Lily and asked her what she wanted to do. Lily was scared and unsure. She didn't know if she was ready to be a mother, but she also didn't want to give up her baby. Sophie told her daughter that she would support her no matter what decision she made. As the months went on, Sophie watched as her daughter's belly grew. She watched as Lily struggled with the changes in her body, both physical and emotional. She knew that her daughter was scared, but she didn't know how to help her. One day, Sophie received a call from Lily's school. The principal told her that Lily had not been attending class regularly and that her grades were suffering. Sophie was shocked and upset. She didn't know what to do to help her daughter. Sophie sat down with Lily and asked her what was going on. Lily told her that she was afraid to go to school. She was afraid that people would judge her for being pregnant and that she would be ostracized by her classmates. Sophie was heartbroken. She knew how hard it was to be a teenager, and she couldn't imagine how much harder it was with a baby on the way. Sophie decided to enroll Lily in a program for pregnant teens. The program provided support for young mothers and helped them finish high school. Lily was hesitant at first, but she agreed to try it out. Sophie watched as her daughter thrived in the program. She made new friends and gained a sense of confidence that Sophie had never seen before. She watched as Lily's belly grew and felt the baby kick inside of her. She knew that her daughter was going to be a wonderful mother. Finally, the day arrived. Lily went into labor, and Sophie rushed her to the hospital. She watched as her daughter pushed and struggled through the pain. And then, finally, the baby was born. Sophie held her granddaughter for the first time and felt a sense of awe wash over her. She knew that this tiny, precious life was going to change everything. As Lily recovered in the hospital, Sophie received a call from her stepfather. He told her that he had heard about Lily's pregnancy and that he was disappointed in her. He said that he didn't want a bastard in his family. Sophie felt a sense of rage wash over her. How could he be so cruel? But then, something unexpected happened. Sophie's mother called her. She told Sophie that she had something to tell her. She said that when Sophie was a teenager, she had confided in her mother about the abuse she had suffered at the hands of her stepfather. Sophie was stunned. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her mother went on to say that she had confronted her stepfather about the abuse, but he had denied everything. Sophie's mother had chosen to believe her husband at the time, but now she realized that she had been wrong. She apologized to Sophie for not believing her all those years ago. Sophie was speechless. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. She had never told anyone about the abuse she had suffered at the hands of her stepfather, not even her daughter Lily. She had always been too ashamed to talk about it. Sophie's mother went on to say that she had confronted her stepfather again after hearing about Lily's pregnancy. This time, he had admitted to the abuse. He said that he was sorry for what he had done, and that he would never do it again. Sophie didn't know how to react. On one hand, she was relieved that her mother finally believed her. On the other hand, she was angry that it had taken so long for her to be believed. She didn't know if she could ever forgive her mother for not standing up for her when she needed her the most. Sophie's mother told her that she had told her stepfather that he needed to make things right with Lily. She said that he had agreed to pay for Lily's college education, and that he wanted to be a part of his granddaughter's life. Sophie didn't know how to feel about this. She had always hated her stepfather, but now she was being asked to forgive him and let him into their lives. She didn't know if she was ready to do that. As Lily recovered from the birth of her daughter, Sophie watched as her daughter became a mother. She watched as Lily held her baby and cried tears of joy. She knew that her daughter was going to be an amazing mother, and she felt a sense of pride wash over her. But Sophie couldn't shake the feeling of anger and resentment towards her stepfather. She knew that she needed to confront him about what he had done to her all those years ago. Sophie called her stepfather and arranged to meet with him. They sat down at a coffee shop and Sophie confronted him about the abuse she had suffered. Her stepfather was visibly shaken by the conversation. He told her that he was sorry for what he had done, and that he had always regretted it. He said that he knew he could never make up for what he had done, but that he wanted to try. Sophie didn't know if she could ever forgive her stepfather, but she decided to give him a chance. They started to meet up regularly, and Sophie watched as her stepfather tried to make amends for what he had done. He paid for therapy for Sophie, and he helped pay for Lily's college education. Sophie watched as her daughter grew up and became a successful young woman. She watched as her granddaughter grew up and became a bright, beautiful child. And through it all, she knew that forgiveness was possible, even in the darkest of situations. Sophie never forgot what her stepfather had done to her, but she chose to move forward with her life. She knew that holding onto anger and resentment would only hold her back. Instead, she chose to focus on the love and joy that her family brought her. And in the end, that was all that mattered. That's all for today. If you liked this story, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Good luck to you all.